Shirley here with Sirius Dallas Moon, and the midheaven is approaching Spica, ascendant 3 degrees Capricorn, ruled by Saturn that's now direct. Moon is 17 degrees Aries, and this is Jupiter hour. Jupiter 24 degrees is Cancer. Okay, still conjuncting Procyon, retrograde. Mercury is direct, so I want to actually talk about January because everybody is doing December astrology right now. And, why do like everyone? So I did December astrology before November because of the many retrogrades and stuff. I'll probably do a recap on December, but I think you can watch my colleagues pretty much covering December. In fact, I'm going to watch my colleagues because I've prepared ahead of time and now I can enjoy it. About 3-4 years ago, even 5 years ago, when I first challenged myself to do an astro weather forecast, which was very messy way before Peter had this lovely arrangement of things, and basically at that time I stopped watching my colleagues because I wanted to challenge myself to come up with a podcast, and that created kind of like a time gap where I would record my own stuff and then see other people's podcasts. So by the time that I would get to watch their stuff, I would already have recorded mine, and a lot of the transit would already have been have been. And by the way, evergreen content in astrology can absolutely be with transits if we create a segment or a content piece that talks about something as transit or natal. Okay, think about, I don't know, Pluto, or let's talk about Moon in Cancer. Okay, so Moon in Cancer, transit, and natal. Series of the Moon. That can be like evergreen content where the forecast is usually very time consuming. It's excellent for beginner astrologers, but it's not the evergreen content that people can return to and can be really, really good, like the series that people pick, whether it's the Deacons with Threads of Fate, the transits and natal stuff, okay, or the foundational astrology with Astrology Podcast. This is the foundation of houses, signs, and planets. Now let's talk January. And January, a couple of things that immediately pop up for me. Chiron turns direct on the 22nd degree. It's going to be the fourth touch of Chiron on the 22nd degree. It's something that is unusual in retrograde motion, and this happens on January 2nd. It's going to address wounds that are there and have been addressed since at least 23, and even before that. Okay, so for me it was tending to political assassination prevention and learning about ritual satanic abuse and extortion cults. So it was like, okay, they're holistically looking at the problem from the core, so it actually and also addressing these topics in my own life. So definitely Chiron is the wounded healer, a sense of embodiment, and 22-degree Aries can have to do with assassinations and military, and yes, anything Aries. So military is Aries, CEOs is Aries, the head of. So it can be the head of state, but doesn't have to be. Okay, that's kind of an Aries Aries issue. People that have had assassination attempts against them in those particular transits, then the core issue that creates assassination is sexual sovereignty, and this is the best thing to tend to. Okay, anything that supports sexual sovereignty can be remediation in that regard. So this is the best tip I can give from the 3-4 years that I've tended to that topic to prevent political assassination, is anything that promotes in essence, okay, because it cannot be the image of, otherwise the prevention would be the image of. Okay, they will just say you're still alive. And so, okay, anything that promotes sexual sovereignty and prevents rape, particularly in Aries, because Aries is kind of like god of war that killed all the rapists. So anything like that is remediation against political assassination. And again, I can't say that it's a guarantee, life save a hack, but it definitely is in praxis, okay? It's impossible to do that without extortion calls that are to do with child trafficking, that later amounts to sex trafficking, and anything that is on the curation from these type of wounds is supportive of prevention of assassination. And by the way, also prevention of murder when it comes to like domestic violence and stuff. And war. And war. It's true, military generals, the head of military. I didn't think about this particular one. But this is Chiron turning direct. So it's going to finally address, and there is a chance to curate here something about a wound to do with assassination. Okay. Hopefully it's not to assassinate someone. And there's going to be a full moon in Cancer conjoining Sirius, and anything that pinpoints Sirius pinpoints the conjunction of Jupiter and Venus in Sirius that we had with Kronos and Hades. So that's going to be in January 3. Full moon in Cancer, the point of Sirius. I think Sirius is not rising in the sky at this point. Yeah. I'm going to take a look at the chart at a later point. We're going to have a Sun, Venus, Mars conjunction in Capricorn. And the conjunction of Venus and Mars is in 18 degrees, which means that the synodic cycle of Venus and Mars is going to be about toxic relations and toxins. Okay? 18 degrees. Okay? The degree that Nicolas Stoyanovich, that had this degree in his chart, called pure evil. So, I know that this is a name that clings in other places, but that is. Yes, but this is going to be Venus and Mars conjoining in Capricorn in 18 degrees. My prediction is that this upcoming synodic cycle of Venus and Mars, that is kind of a local. It happens every year and something, and yet it's very meaningful to see where the Venus and Mars meet. And they meet in Capricorn, the sign of climbing up the ladder, and they meet in 18 degrees, which is the degree of toxicity. So probably going to be addressing toxic relations, prenuptials that are not fair, or the value of assets keeping, toxic relations within regarding borders, because Saturn is also borders. Remember when Venus was in Capricorn, I addressed the fact that if people marry and they're from different countries and they have children, the child usually stay in the country where of the parent that connects. Let's say if there is one parent in Netherlands, one in Israel, and the child is born in Netherlands, the child will stay in Netherlands. Okay, except for Israel, which is a weird animal that deports everybody, except for pedophiles and and not war criminals. So, it's like, but Eichmann, but the folks that trafficked Jewish girls and women and boys. They don't talk about the boys. To Argentina and created the Holocaust. Nobody talks about it. You got Israel. Abolish human trafficking and we'll abolish genocides. So, so we got the spirit of, whenever I talk about a transit, usually I pay attention to the things that come along. And this is one of the issues, okay? Venus, Mars, and the conjunction on 18 degree is basically a toxic encounter of Venus and Mars, and we are going to address that now. Let's see how is the moon doing, because it's going to tell me a lot if it's a culmination cycle or if it is basically starting something. Now, because Saturn, the ruler, is about to end a synodic cycle with Neptune on the world degree on Valentine's Day, and then, oh, look at the moon. It's 18 degrees Virgo, which is closing a cycle, and Ketu in 11 degree. Falcon, it's quite a toxic cycle of culmination of something. The toxic relations to do with climbing up the ladder. There will be poison, there will be assassination, there would be extortion calls, there would be suicide topics. There would be just like it's a very like if that was a movie, it would be like this soap opera that everybody comes to watch, but it's not a movie, and that's the problem. Now the fact that the sun is applying to conjoin, so we're gonna have this Sun Venus Mars meeting. And this is where this triad in Capricorn is probably going to be significant, especially when the moon is trining it from Virgo. And we're going to have a toxic agreement between toxic relations that creates something that could actually, you know, to do with assassination. But it's ruling Chiron. So I really don't know to predict. And Mars is exalted in Capricorn. So Mars has duration. Mars has, okay, Mars here is quite competent. So I don't know. Okay, like I don't know where it will go. There's a lot of 18ing stuff. And the opposition to Jupiter, which means that Mars is still in orb to oppose Jupiter. So there is a flare of philosophical, religious war in that mix. Okay, quite a potent, competent, but it's also competent at doing evil. What would negate that? I don't know. Mars is directing Pisces still. So it's aiming us back to that Jupiter that's ruled by the moon, that's ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is in the sign of Saturn, in 9 degrees Capricorn. There's definitely a closing of a cycle, but there is a big event closing that cycle. Moon in Virgo can be something toxic about fertility or toxic type of care. Okay? Or contracts to do with toxic type of housing, because moon can be housing. There's a toxic housing or house that there's toxin in it, and there can be debt. Or there's just something very weird about this that doesn't point to one way or another. Like I can't tell you, oh, the good will win upon evil, or this time evil is competent and it's taking a video. Like there's something that I really don't know where it will go here. So it's absolutely not a closing of a cycle. And from here, the Lord of Fortune sits on the moment of the encounter. The Lord of Fortune sits in Aries, 18 in Aries, which is both the exaltation degree of the sun, but it's also still like 18 degrees. So I don't know. That's it's just kind of like it's going to be significant. There's going to be competence in doing evil, but there's also going to be a big conflict, and it has to do with housing and debt and assassination and extortion, all these things. And how should I say it? It would be best if Sun, Venus, and Mars would have been meeting in a better degree, or in a better, composition for that encounter. Okay, that would be the best. That is not the case. Now, the cycles that are opening and closing are the 2.5 year cycle of Mars, um, that I think is the biggest one here. And Saturn is going to close the cycle with Neptune within less than a month, in February 14. It's going to continue on. Okay, so um, the implications are going to be relatively immediate to even the most competent of evil. Now, I don't know what the implications will be. Okay, so so I don't. Okay, so this is something that um, that is, it's looking nefarious more so than benefic. Okay, and it's a deacon of preparing for. I call it the prepper's deacon. Um, okay, according to us in Kapakudi, the talisman of that deacon, it's a deacon that tell people to gather. Ooh, okay. I want to address something. A lot of people, I know that I had this, and if I had this, probably Googleplex people had this. A lot of people gathered things like food and storage of stuff, and then they had to flee. So there's something about this that is using the prepper's deacon in in a way that's kind of evil. Okay, it's kind of like to get people to gather stuff and then to evacuate them or to scare them away or to do something toxic that they will run. Um, then people have to remember that the encounter on Ares is the god of those. Ares, if people like invoke Ares, is to kill the rapists. And all those who saw Ares as something that people make sacrifices, human sacrifices to Ares, rather than the war dance that liberates the energy or the life energy to protect, to kill the rapey things within and outside society, then they are getting entangled in karma. But this karma will soon dissolve with Saturn and Neptune. So there's just something here that's very competent in doing evil, but it's about to dissolve of certain structures. So because Neptune is so mysterious, I don't know. Um, but there's something toxic about preparing for something. The way that people try to prepare themselves for war are toxic, and that might not sustain the war. That's what I'm getting. Venus opened a synodic cycle with Pluto on January 20, and she does so quite along the Sun. Now, the last synodic cycle that we had with Venus opening with Pluto was around the kidnapped people, and there were returning of women kidnapped, which brought the returning of the bones of the kidnapped people as well, in Israel. But I know that there are also Palestinians kidnapped, and all these type of things. And there was also kind of like this ongoing war with Ukraine and Russia, and there are many places where there are kidnapped people. So the opening of the cycle now is in 3 degrees, and I think back then it was in 2 degrees, and now it's in 3 degrees Aquarius, quite close to the Sun. So it's going to be a cycle of opening synodic cycles of Venus, Sun, Mercury, and Mars, and I think all of them happen in January. Sun conjoins Pluto January 23rd. Mercury conjoins Pluto January 22. Okay, Venus January 20, and Mars, the latest of the bunch, on January 28. Okay, So we're going to have a series of planet opening synodic cycle with an outer planet. It means that there is a series of things to do with Pluto. Now, Saturn is still going to be at the end of Pisces. So there's a series of things to do with a reality check on beliefs, hospitality, even channeling and divination. And there is a series of things beginning around there. Around relations, values, diplomatic relations, the voice, Venus. Around contracts, words, communication, nervous system and nervous system hacking, anything that is small and detailed, Mercury, technology, Mercury. Around health, heart health, heart health, heart health, okay? Creativity, removing of tyranny, leadership and transforming the leadership, father roles, leader roles, monarchies, sun, around war, penis, blood, genitals, 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 genitals. Here's a big thing happening with Chiron and Aries to do with the elite and the genitals of the elite, basically, including the lack of. And yes, of course, arms, weapons, sex, um, the use of boys in war, okay, the use of veterans, the PTSD kind of stuff, okay, all that is Mars. So, for example, us in Israel, we have the story of Rom and the story of a woman that survived human trafficking by Israelis in Israel, got acknowledgement from the state, and those stories intertwine because Rom was in imprisonment by Hamas, and he complained that there is no help, and he went through rape and basically trafficking, that's what it was, and there is no assistance that is sufficed from the state to the victims of such crimes, and these two stories, these two testimonies align. So that's just something that pops up in my mind. I know Annika Lucas had the interview with Sven Kohl, that is also running the group that of shifting the power. And he was dressed as a girl when he was a boy to basically be used to sex trafficking and extortion cults um, in East Germany, while it was the same network. Okay, and what connects the dots was, I'm sorry, the people being buried alive with dead people. So he survived such burial. And by the way, one of the psychic attacks that I had in academia had to do with exactly that, of somebody that was psychically attacking me in a way that was like it was burying me alive, and I had to get released from being buried alive and trying to traffic me, like all kind of really dumb fuckery stuff. I know I never talked about that, but that was something that was using the dream state to create that trauma. And again, I'm being very cautious because all of these people that do that, or the programmers, are also programmed. So it's not about, oh, that person did that to me. It's kind of like, hey, there's a system of systems that is both puppeteering and puppeteered, and people will have both the part that tries to help and the part that is programmed. Okay, they go through excruciating torture, and unfortunately, they put people through excruciating torture. And this is why the right to exit violence is so important. And those are the things that paramount when I begin to talk about this series of synodic cycles, closing and opening with Pluto on January. Throughout January, okay, so it's towards from January 20 to January 28. It's basically going to be 8 days of massive amounts of topics, opening a cycle with Pluto, that is a transmutation, transformation, birthing, and so on and so forth. What's more? Let's go back back with you, Peter. um, the new moon in Capricorn is 28 degrees Capricorn. Mercury will conjoin Mars at 26 Capricorn. So we have Capricorn and Aquarius highly active in January, which kind of makes sense. Okay, the sun is going through Capricorn, but it's not just the sun. There's a series, what we call the stellium, going through Capricorn, um, which means that the topics of climbing up the mountain and then dissolving into the place where there's no more guidance. And this is where the journey of Capricorn to Aquarius is going to be very prominent throughout January. There's going to be a climbing. Now, when we climb up the mountain, um, we need the guidance of the people that did that and came back alive, because the only things to learn from is the skulls of the bones of the dead, and try to think through history, how did they die, while the person could be about to make the same mistake and freeze in the cold. One of the things that I read in the book that I'm reading by Yo Nespo is about a man that peed in his own shoes. I don't know why. Okay, maybe it was by accident, and they had to amputate his toes. Okay, because he was walking in the snow. And this is how Saturn, that also is denoting of cold and snow, is kind of like unforgiving, the unforgiving nature of nature, which is kind of like, well, it's nobody is, it's not about blame or shame. It's kind of like, if you don't do that, you're gonna get your toes cut up, and that is and that is just the code, that is just the conditions, where in Capricorn we need the guidance of the people that know the terrain to guide us through the terrain. In Aquarius, we rebel against the tried and true. This is the scientific revolution. And this is why Aquarius is also to do with space. It's uncharted territory. I have, for example, 12th house in Aquarius, and one of the things with 12th house in Aquarius is that to maintain my mental health, I need to be in alignment with the scientific revolution that the generations are not yet speaking about. Now, wherever Aquarius is in your chart, it's going to be true. Okay, if it's like the 6th house, Vulcan with Virgo ascendant, it means that your heart health or your bone marrow and nervous system, you need to, first of all, it's insanely important for you to not follow the threads of medicine taught to you by those who talk about the bone marrow blessing. Okay, because they teach you the exactly upside down from bone marrow health. And, and that is, now, yeah, the folk with Saturn in Aquarius is like, we know that. Guys, you have Saturn in Aquarius. Don't, not all of you know that, okay? So okay? Some of you might, some of you won't, but even with that, there is something that requires a scientific revolution to treat the health, the physical health, if Aquarius is in the 6th house. Okay, Aquarius, let's say in the 7th house, that is Leo ascendant, there's something that is revolutionizing the nature of relationships, for example. Um, by the way, my D9 has a tropical ascendant Leo, which means that Aquarius would be my 7th, and I had been juxtaposed to the elite. So, and people are like, well, things you need to know, things you need to know. Um, so, and that is, yes, that is kind of like really unusual. um, and so this is where, not only that, the Aries is going through my ruler of 7th and 4th. So that is, one cannot be juxtaposed more than that. And this is probably why I'm tending to all these things that I'm tending to. Um, Now, more things about January that pop up immediately. The ingress of Neptune to Aries, January 26th. Okay, so Neptune arrives before Saturn. And it's probably going to be highly significant because this is the Neptune ingress for good. And it's probably going to be the holistic aspect of war, the holistic aspect of the anything head related. Mars is going to be in Aquarius. Okay, so it's to do with the bones of the skull and holistic perspective of the. It's probably going to be a revival of the facial physiognomy, the same stuff we had in the Holocaust. I know. Um, My grandfather actually knew some facial physiognomy to recognize because he depended on it on his life. He had the physiognomy of a closer to Irish, so he could get out of the ghetto and back in and smuggle food. And he knew how to identify the physiognomy of people, and that was essential for his survival because he was escaping the Holocaust from like the forests of Italy. Then he had typhus, which means he wasn't recruited by the partisans to, I don't know, rape people. And he wasn't also recruited as slave because he was sick. And then he escaped to Israel, where they told him it's too bad Hitler did not finish the job. That is a warm welcoming. So, by the way, had a shop to do with food, which was grocery, like kind of like foods and vegetables, which eventually had to sell the store as well. But that was, and my grandma was the main breadwinner, um, but she lost her literal feet eventually after years of work, and the house was lost as well. So Neptune into Aries is probably going to revive the looking at the bone structure even before Saturn, because Mars is in Aquarius, is going to revive the science of looking at the bone structure, but also the myth of the science, okay? Because we know that that was used to decide, oh, this person has the bone structure of an offender, which is kind of like we're gonna have that dumb fuckery as well with actually interesting bone structure related genealogies and stuff like that. A lot of it is kind of Nazi and eugenics, but some of that is interesting. Um, so that's probably going to be Neptune in Aries. I've already seen that with the skull, the feminine skull versus the masculine skull, looking at the elite and elite genealogy. Um, so that is defining the origin of the bloodline by the bone structure, if it is of Mars nature, okay, with to do with the genitals that we already see happening regarding the elite. And what's more, the Neptune ingress, patient sovereignty, okay? Where there's no patient sovereignty, there's no healing. Those that get that, and remember the intuitions that you have on the ingress of an outer planet to 0 degree of something. Because either we're going to get that patient sovereignty is needed for healing on Neptune 0 degree, or it's going to be 15 years of learning that the hard way, which is kind of like mass debt, global mass debt, global mass debt, colonialism, mass debt, colonialism, colonialism, mass debt by colonialism, mass debt of colonialism, mass debt by escaping from colonialism, mass debt because somebody idealized the medicine that they give to the colony. And I was like, oh, patient sovereignty is actually important for mental health. Good morning. That's and also sexual sovereignty, which kind of like, will we even have hospitals? So, um, Mars conjoining Pluto that we talked about. Mercury conjoins Venus at 14 degrees Aquarius. Um, Again, high on the Capricorn, high on the Aquarius. New moon in Capricorn, full moon in Cancer. So, and the only significant points outside of that is Aries, which of course squares Capricorn, and sextiles Aquarius. Um, there's going to be a month that's to do with a lot of reality checks on beliefs. Regarding authority, both the underdogs and the traditional, okay? Um, it's way bigger month than it's telling, okay? Because there isn't, there's the ingress of Neptune, but it's kind of like it's not yet the Saturn Neptune. It is, Uranus is still, I think, retrograde at this time. Yes, Uranus will still be retrograde because it's direct to 27 with the on Valentine's Day. It's gonna be the world most remembered Valentine's Day, um, and Chiron is going direct, but it's kind of like almost nobody cares about Chiron except for the people that are like healing the wounds of assassination and stuff. Um, and then it kind of looks like, well, a lot of Capricorn, a lot of Aquarius. Okay, nothing like huge happening, but there is masses of synodic cycle opening with Pluto, the meeting of the Sun, Mars, and Venus in Capricorn. Um, and those almost invisible things, okay, that are the series of planets within 1 week, all going and opening synodic cycle with Pluto. It's a massive ending and massive beginning, and the beginning will have an ending unfolding in it type of month, way bigger than it's telling. Okay. And this is the last month before the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in the for good transit of Neptune into Aries in 0 degree Aries. So it's kind of like last call. And things are getting overwhelming. Yes, this we're just not going into anything other than this page. It's not an eclipse month. February 17 we already have the first eclipse that accentuate the Saturn Neptune. So to make sure that none of us misses that transit, okay, to make sure that none of us forgets or misses or not notices that Saturn is about to meet Neptune on a worldly scale. Um, So it's going to be a very overwhelming month. People that have placements in Aquarius and in Capricorn, you're going to experience this month as a prolonged tsunami, and some of it is culminating in some of your birthdays or solar returns, which means it's a prolonged tsunami, okay? And it culminates into um, a flood, okay, a massive flood. That being said, there can also be, um, how should I say that? There's a lot of grace that comes with such transits, okay? Because it's, for many people it's going to be the implications of their actions, particularly those that were led to believe that they can get away with things. It's kind of like, yeah, we can get away. Think about, Saturn rules teeth. We can get away with eating sweets, get away with this, get away with it. Eventually, we're going to have to tend to our teeth, okay? Or eventually, and I think about, still in reading this Yo Nesbo book, it's kind of like eventually the people that committed all these atrocities, whether under the guise of Bolshevism or capitalism, fascism, Nazism, or even liberalism, eventually they're going to be hunted like the Nazis. Like, and when that arrives, there are also moments of grace upon, because Saturn rules this. And there's also moments of grace where the understanding that a lot of people couldn't predict, okay, people that came from, different timelines in history where rules were different or they were accustomed to different things, a lot of these people couldn't predict. It's like they knew it's wrong, but they could get it because the mixing of what is right and wrong, the everything means nothing, okay, all these things. And there is a sense of grace where that actually does accumulate to implications. Um, so there's a sense of grace and even purity around the fact that, well, it does culminate to implications. There are implications for all these children that were trafficked. There are implications for all the rapes that were done. There are implications for all the crimes that people thought they would just get away with. It now culminates, and I opened this morning with a reading where people are not going to donate blood because the needle was accustomed to a bloodletting ritual and pain and torture, and then people are not going through to that, and they already are aware that that blood would not be well absorbed. So there's no point of putting themselves through torture only to have their blood thrown or used in bloodletting rituals and not even well absorbed by the patients that need blood donation. Or the people are afraid to donate organs because the rape that happens in hospitals under anesthesia. There are implications, and we meet them in a life and death situation. And there are people that are no longer with us because they jumped from a building because they were raped or because of attempts to traffic them. And there are people that, as far as it's their decision, decided not to have children because of what is done to children and what is done to mothers that have children, to try to make them, uh, um, to traffic them because thinking that they would do that when they have a child. There are mothers that killed their infants and committed suicide so that they won't end up in those things, because the child is also being sacrificed and eventually is either shot or commit suicide. Okay? A lot of Saturn, a lot of implications, a lot of this, a lot of awareness to this, meeting the endings of things, and and a lot of that is things that people couldn't predict. Okay, think about a woman that is married and just wants to protect her marriage, and so she doesn't know that the third party is affiliated with the trafficking campaign, and there was a love bombing that was meant to traffic, and even her spouse might be mind controlled, and that supposed third party is a person that's trying to escape trafficking and find nourishment that is love, that is actually loving, so that they will have housing, food, and then they try to kill something while having maybe trying to have a daughter. Okay? The evictions of people into their debts, into trafficking, that were done by, okay, by astral rape, and sometimes not only astral. No amount of love can justify rape. And that's something where with January we meet the endings, okay, of these cycles. So the Sun will square Chiron January 12th. And the entire stellium, okay, if it's Mercury, Mars, Venus, are all going to square Chiron. Mercury squares Neptune on January 1st. December is when we have the Mars. No, the Mars squaring Neptune we have in January as well. Oh, we have it, sorry. Mars will square Neptune from Sagittarius. We have it in December. But it will sextile Neptune when it applies to conjoin Pluto. Um, Not an easy month. Definitely, if winters are about going within, if Saturn is about going within, this is a big month of going within. Okay, January, almost everything is in Saturn's sign, and Saturn is in the last degrees of Pisces. So everything is about going within, on the reality checks on our beliefs, particularly around fertility. The implications of certain processes to do with fertility, sperm count. Saturn Pisces is the big sperm count. Um, castration, the topic of castration. There's a documentary I still haven't watched about forced castration in Europe. Israel is world renowned. Okay, the way that all psychiatric medications are forced castration, while all psychiatric diseases are having to do with the life energy and sexual boundary violation. So, okay, there's definitely something need to change about that. Um, okay, the very intricate topic. And there is severe implication for those repeat practices in spirit and in matter. People that did not tend to their teeth because there was sexual boundary violation in the medicine, or because of traumas that are there. Okay, then think about those that were part of the creation of those traumas. And with that, the grace where those that stop creating those traumas for other people, there is a lot of grace that comes with that. The organs that are derived from human sacrifice are probably not going to be well absorbed. And this is another, it's an energy reading that comes with this shit ton of ambulances as I speak. To receive, to absorb an organ, that organ comes from a body that comes from a consciousness. And it's much similar to the process where they were stealing life energy from people and then they have to, one way or another, create the things that those people that would have been alive would create with their energy, but they would not be, how should I say that? Women got the right to vote after the Second World War. Nobody sees Hitler as the liberator of women, I hope. Okay? The life energy of the suffragist, because women at the Me Too did not fully address the, and only the women that are actually in occult sciences began to address that, and people like Gigi Young, people like Trudy Verstegen, um, but the women that addressed the Me Too, they weren't really addressing, they were afraid to be called crazy, and they just left it at that. I was looking into the science of the body mind question, actually, regardless of that, and then that just happened in academia while I was doing my research. And this was okay. This was where I didn't let that go, and I did delve deeper, and I didn't litigate into a system that was imbued with extortion cults, okay, to basically get the title. For some of them, it wasn't even a choice to be born. It's like, hey, that kid will be a judge, that da 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 da, and they program him like, whether it's in a certain way. Um, and so the discussion about the right to exit violence is highly important in that regard, and the discernment of when is a person in recovery and when is a person um, still posing risk, and honoring the sovereignty within. Get a lot of intricacies that are created in that realm. But the energy reading that I'm receiving here regarding the topic of if, whether it's organ donation or organ harvesting, that the consciousness of the recipient needs to be able to fully absorb the organ, whether it's by donation or not. They need to align with the consciousness of the person that's doing, let's talk about the nation in that case. It's not just the blood type, but also the consciousness, because there's some compatibility on values, Venus, that has to be there. And sometimes um, that journey of recovery um, on a holistic level contains that and that. Okay, they have to, if they particularly think about, if I think about the energy reading I gave this morning, so if somebody needed to absorb a certain organ, then their consciousness needed to agree with the consciousness of the donor on a particular level, on a value level, and that had to do with the reason that of the disease. Okay, so they had to align, let's say, with sexual sovereignty to absorb the organ, and for that not to be put to waste. Okay, for that not to be okay, something that they would. And then the process of getting the organ that was not compatible with sexual sovereignty, or the attempt to get the organ that was not compatible with sexual sovereignty, will not be fit with what needs to heal, so that they wouldn't die even after the implant. Okay, and that is a very, very challenging topic. And again, it's an intuition. Okay, okay, so it's an energy reading, it's an intuition. I know it raises a lot of things, but hey, most of the people that are triggered are partaking in and invested in organ harvesting, not even organ donation, and violation of sexual boundaries. So most of the people triggered by this conversation, were okay with crime against humanity that led to organ failure, immune system failure, ailments, suicide attempts that caused all these ailments because of people that were raped and tried to end their life. So, and it's a bit of a culmination for me, because I was looking into the body mind question. To absorb an implanted organ, we do need the spirit and the matter to align. Okay, medical, because otherwise it's just, if we look at it as just organs, as just the material, just the physical, then we understand that the body needs to be relaxed to absorb the organ, and the donation needs to be with as little trauma as possible to the body. because but when there is the even the psychological related trauma, then we already understand there's a body mind connection here, and it is a part of the culminating discourse for my thesis proposal that began with the intention to not stay in the ivory tower, and actually it exposed